Greetings, amigops, and top teners everywhere. This is Mike from Top 10 with Kyle and Mike. This week, as every week, I'm joined by our lovely, headphoned, bespectacled, bebearded, behaired co-host, Kyle. Kyle looks very handsome this evening. You're going to hear it in his voice. So this week, as every week, we're going to be discussing a topic. I don't know what the hell the topic is. We're going to be debating it vigorously, and over the course of this hopefully digestible episode, we will have a definitive top 10 list. So Kyle, what are we talking about this week?
Okay, Mike, the date of this recording is March the 6th in the year of our Lord, 2019. The date...
I'm already excited.
Well, the date of our publication will be like 2 weeks from now, which means that we'll be pretty close to opening day for the Major League Baseball season.
What a disappointing turn of events. I was really hoping this was going to be an Ash Wednesday podcast. An utterly disappointing little turn you took there.
Sorry. Top 10 things to give up in Lent. We're going to be talking baseball today. We have done a few sports podcasts, but we are going to be, they've been mostly silly, or they've been emergency pods. Today we're going to get into it a little bit. It's not going to be super nerdy as baseball can get, but we're going to get a little more actually sports talky than we have in the past. So this could be fun. And I think this will end up being a series that we end up doing for all four of the major sports, which I think could be fun.
Okay. All right. So what exactly are we talking about?
So as you know, in spring, hope springs eternally. So during spring training, any team could win the World Series, and every team has hope no matter what the circumstances. Even if your team is in a rebuild that came a few years too late, for example. But some fans eagerly anticipate and hope more desperately than others because their wait has been longer. Today we are going to be discussing the top 10 most tortured fan bases in baseball. So here's what I've done. We're doing a little bit of a twist on what we're normally doing. I put this list together kind of. I used some metrics to put this list together, and I'm going to tell you how the top 10 shook out. And then we are together going to decide where my metric went wrong and where we have to do adjustments and where my equation has not worked where it needed to.
Oh, I like this so much. What a fun way to do this.
I think so. I think it could work out quite well.
Okay, so I just, before you tell me your rankings, the biggest thing I need to understand is, so this is most tortured historically, or like the average amount of torture per season. So the Red Sox are a good example. So the Red Sox have existed for over 100 years, and for a very long stretch in that 100 plus years, our fan base has been utterly tortured. As of right now, we're feeling great. There's no torture at all. But on average, we've experienced quite a bit of torture. How does that sort of play out?
We can talk about it, but in my opinion, we're factoring in total longevity of fan base torture. But I'm certainly willing to skew more recently because, like, if you're really old Red Sox fan, like a large percentage of your fandom was torture. But like for someone like you, so like I'm definitely gonna weight more heavily recent performance in terms into your torture ranking. But I think it would be stupid not to take into account total. But that's not how... So I'll tell you how I ranked these initially, and I'll give you some perspective. So literally all I did was I thought, well, a fan base is considered tortured if they haven't won a championship in a long time. So I went through and I figured out each team's first year in the league and then the last time that they won a World Series.
Yep.
And then calculated the difference. So total... or I calculated how long it's been since their last championship in years. But then I thought, well, even if you haven't won a championship in a long time, I'd say your fandom is less tortured if your team has at least been consistently contending and in the conversation for a World Series.
Yep.
So the second metric that I used is how long has it been since your team played for a championship? So won the pennant, basically.
Yep. That's big because, but this does get to a question that I think will come up is it worse to be always a bridesmaid, never the bride, or is it worse to not even be invited to the wedding?
That's not factored into this, and I've highlighted some teams that... So, and then I also calculated separately win percentage in the World Series. So if you have a 0 win percentage, it means that you visited the World Series at least once and have never won, which sucks and might boost your tortured status. So, I think it's obviously winning a championship. I've weighted that more heavily. So the equation is literally just number of years since your last title plus number of years that since your last pennant, but I've weighted them so that the championship drought has 2 times the weight of a pennant drought.
So it's a little bit of like MVP voting.
Yeah, it's a weighted average of championship and pennant droughts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I did it. And then I'll give you the top, and then I sorted based on that, and I'll give you what the top 10 were, and then we can figure out where my metric has failed. But I was pretty pleased with the top 10 as is, because all 10 of these franchises, I think you could consider tortured for sure.
Well, I think it's important for the listeners to totally understand where you're coming from, because I'm not exactly sure where your hometown team shakes out on these rankings, but you are an especially tortured fan. And a member of an especially tortured fan base.
I don't know. We can talk about it because besides this metric, something we're going to talk about are, like you said, general torturedness of your history. Since your last pennant win or since your last World Series win, how relevant has your team been? Mm-hmm. Have they been making playoff appearances? Do they have any Hall of Fame players? Like the quality of the players, like exciting. Yeah. How exciting is your team to watch, even if they're not winning a World Series? Your stadium situation, I think, plays into it.
I don't want to like spoil it all out of the gate, but I do think you raised some really good points there that are going to come up.
Yes, and then so like by those metrics, though, the Tigers, I don't consider myself a tortured fan. I'm a 25, almost 26-year-old man who's never seen my team win a championship, but I've watched my team go to 2 World Series and get absolutely murdered both times. I've watched Hall of Famer Miguel Cabrera for a very long time, a revolving door of really exciting, high-performing players like Justin Verlander, Max Scherzer. Like, I do not consider myself a tortured fan in the ways that some other... Because I've enjoyed my fandom for the most part and been dealt some crushing blows.
Yeah. Well, fundamentally, this will come back to the question of, is it worse to be you and have your balls crushed right on the doorstep, or is it worse to be, I don't know, say just some random fan in South Florida who has an empty, hideous stadium and just a dump bag of a team?
Well, we're talking about tortured here, not like most depressed fan bases, so that goes into it too.
Yeah. All right, this is great. I'm psyched.
Yeah, I think this will be a fun one. And like I said, I think we can do this for all the sports. And I think that eventually we can do a power ranking weighted, and we can just talk about generally most tortured cities. So I think we could milk this one for a lot. And I think this one lends itself to some good fan. I think we have some friends that could fit in well on some of these. So I'm excited to get started.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So number 10 on the Kyle metric of tortured fan basedom is the Minnesota Twins. So the Twins were established in 1961. They have won 2 World Series. Yep. I believe they went back-to-back in 1990. Or no. They couldn't have.
Yeah, they got the Puckett years, right?
Yeah, they won in the late 80s, I think, and then their most recent World Series victory was 1991. They have not returned to the World Series since then.
Okay.
So, they've waited, let's see. I need to figure out my spreadsheet here. So, it's been 28 years since their last championship. And for me, that figure's about right. I feel like if there's an adult, there needs to be an adult man that's a fan of your team that's never seen your team win to be considered for tortured fan basedom. Wouldn't you say?
Like our good friend Matt.
Yeah, exactly.
Or a Minnesota sports fan guy.
Yeah. Poor Minnesota sports fans guy.
Yeah.
But so you could be a 28-year-old man and have never seen your Twins even play in the World Series. So that's a factor. Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to note that the Twins have a really hard time wooing free agents, and so their luck is largely based on getting lucky with draft talent.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of high-end talent since Kirby Puckett, I mean, there's basically Justin Morneau, Joe Mauer, Johan Santana.
They had Johan Santana is a good one. And now they've got like a second wave where they've got like the Byron Buxtons and they had Brian Dozier for a while, but
they had Torrey Hunter.
Yeah, they did have they even had David Ortiz before he was good. So
yeah.
I think, but like in the mid 2000s when they were dominating the AL Central, the Mauer, Morneau, Jason Kubel, Michael Kadire.
Jason Kubel, oh my
remember
God.
Him?
Wow. Yep, I do.
Those years were great for them from a contending standpoint in the regular season, but I think this factors into their torture. Yeah. They just repeatedly got destroyed in the playoffs.
They were a terrible playoff team.
And they were playing in one of the shittiest baseball stadiums ever constructed in the whatever that was called.
What the hell is that called?
The something
the
dome.
Metrodome?
Metrodome. Ugh.
Which I always found weird because they're not the Mets.
No.
What's really interesting for me, just from the stadium angle, is having finally seen the Twin Cities. What a shame. What a shame to hide the beautiful city. Like, it's so gorgeous there. Open that baby up.
It's beautiful, and their new field, though I've been around it, and I've been in Minneapolis enough lately to understand that it's really a gem.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to see a game there. It televises really well, which is nice.
Yes, it does.
After watching the Tigers play in that stupid dome for so many years.
Yeah.
And it always just makes me think of game 163 in 2009, which makes me cry a little bit every time.
Every time.
So that's number 10.
Yep.
I think we could probably zip through the initial ranking faster this time so that we have more time to kind of debate it.
Yeah.
Number 9. This one's for you, Sarah.
Yes.
Number 9 is the Cincinnati Reds. So the Reds came to Cincinnati in 1959, and since then they have won 5 World Series.
That is very true.
But the last one was in 1990, and that is also the last time that they played.
So how many did the Big Red Machine win? Like, did they win 3 of them with that team?
I feel like they won like 4 in the 80s.
Okay.
Which is insane.
Yeah.
They've also been to 9 World Series, so they're 5 for 9, which is pretty good. That's what you'd expect.
Mm-hmm. So what's their where did they load up on torture then in your metric?
Well, they're just above the Twins because, or I guess, I'm not exactly sure why. Oh yeah, well it's okay. So the Twins were 91 was their last pennant in World Series, and the Reds are 1990. So it's everything that Twins fans are going through, just one more year. So that's why they're just above them on the scale.
Okay, respect.
Although I will say that their past has been less of a bummer. They've had more contending teams than I'd say the Twins, or more like legitimate World Series contenders since 1990, and they've had some really exciting players and a great fan base in Cincinnati. We went to visit our good friend Sarah in Cincinnati and had just the most delightful time at Great American Ballpark.
Yeah, it's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah. So, I mean, you take the good with the bad. They had Ken Griffey Jr. for a while.
Yeah.
And then they had Ken Griffey Jr. for a while.
Yeah, that's the tough part. And that's that was the ups and the downs there. I think the Reds definitely, to me, I think that they're much more of a bummer than the Twins because you as that 28-year-old, that theoretical 28, 29-year-old who's never seen a championship has to listen to your parents tell you about how great, the Pete Rose teams were. Like, so that to me is what makes that even worse. Like the theoretical you or me as a Reds fan is much more miserable because we got to listen to our parents tell us how great, the old teams were.
That's a good point. Although I think there's some lessening of tortured fan base if you know that your franchise at one time was very storied. So like the Reds did have this era of glory that you can only hear about, but it did exist and you know of it. Like the Tigers had a golden era back in like the fucking 20s, but it did happen, and like they're an old team, so there's some prestige that helps me bear the ignominy of failure. But
yeah, it's true. It's kind of a pick your poison situation.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Number 8 would be the Oakland Athletics.
Yeah, they're tortured. the PR, like even without getting into any of this, the simple fact that everybody knows your team and expects them to win because they watch the movie just makes it a lot tougher to be an A's fan.
It's very difficult, but when one of the most famous lines about your team is, here's all the teams in baseball, then there's 50 yards of shit, and then there's us. That's a bummer when that's your team. Yeah. So their last World Series win was 89. I believe that was the tail end of like the Eckersley, like Henderson, Reggie Jackson type teams. Mm-hmm. Or he might have even been on the Yankees at that point.
Would McGuire have been on those teams?
Probably. I don't think the Cardinals got him until a few years after that.
Yeah.
They might have even had... No, Giambi would have been later. Never mind.
Yeah.
But anyways, that was like kind of the 80s were a big time for the A's. Yeah. And they won in 89, and then they played against the Reds in the 1990 World Series and lost. Mm-hmm. So that was their last taste of glory. They've been to 4 World Series since they've been to 6 World Series since 1968 and won 4 of them. Mm-hmm. So it's not a completely successless franchise, but it's been some time, and just the fact that they have to build their team every year out of scraps and they play in a dumpster of a stadium.
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing. Like the biggest problem with the A's is not even on the page. It's the stadium and like the fan situation and the fact that the city is constantly threatening to kick them out. It's just it's such an unstable situation.
It's pretty gross. And having recently visited the Bay Area, the recent like swing over to Giants fandom has kind of left the A's as like very much a relegated second team. Mm-hmm. It just is a bummer. Like, you know, if you have something good, it's not going to last. Like they get Yoenis Cespedes and everyone is like completely shocked. And it's like, cool, let's enjoy him for 2 years before he goes to play for the fucking Red Sox and Tigers and Mets. Like, I don't know. I mean, there's got to be some pride in the fact that like they contended for a lot of the time since their last World Series. Like they go through phases where they were good. Like when the Tigers were having their stretch from like 2011 to 2014, they played the A's almost every year in the playoffs and beat them every time, just saying. But so they've had their fun. And I will say though that there's a unique brand to their fandom, because I remember when I was watching all those games, I was always very impressed with how loud and persistent their fans were, which is not a thing that Tigers fans really do. Like, you know what I mean? Like they're a quieter cheering section. Like the A's are like the student section at a college football game. I
think part of it has to do with the choice. Like I think you have the choice to be an A's fan or a Giants fan, and I think if you choose to be an A's fan, it's more of a baseball decision. Like I think that the baseball fans in the Bay Area are A's fans.
I kind of feel the same way about Sox versus Cubs fans. Yeah. Like probably there's some truth to that with Mets and Yankees fans too, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
not you, John. You're the best.
No, not you, John. All right. Number 7. Number 7 is the Texas Rangers.
Yes. They're very tortured.
Rangers were introduced to the league in 1972, and since then they have won 0 World Series titles.
Which is crazy because it's also crazy that they were only introduced in 1972. They feel like an old-timey baseball team.
Yeah, I think it's because they've had some great players come through there.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you think about the Rangers, and there's plenty to think about.
Yeah, I mean, like, they've got a pretty storied history, and it seems like they're always, like, in the picture. They're being talked about. They can sign big players in free agency. think the income tax helps there. But like
Yeah.
in recent memory, they've had some really great players. They've had Adrian Beltre, Josh Hamilton, Michael Young. I mean,
Yeah.
and then even some of these other like Elvis Andrus, Ian
Yeah, Elvis
Kinsler.
Andrus is a good player.
So I mean, like, I think it's a good time to be a Rangers fan. Like, it's fun. They had Nelson Cruz when he was. I'll never forgive him for hitting. I think he hit like 7 home runs in a 4-game sweep of the Tigers.
Yeah. It was at least 6.
It was brutal.
That was our freshman year, right?
Yeah,
I remember that. I think it.
No.
No.
It was the year. It was the year before they made the World Series. So it was 2011.
So it was.
Which.
Yeah. So
our freshman year. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
I remember that because I remember how miserable you were because he just kept jacking homers. It was ridiculous.
I almost cried.
Yeah, it was awful. But at any rate, yeah, the Rangers are just such like they've got great uniforms. They have a really classic uniform scheme. They've got a really famous and well-known ballpark. They've
Great
got
ballpark.
like people our age probably associate Nolan Ryan most strongly with them. Like people think about big time baseball with them, and yet they are just tortured. They really are.
What's worse, and I think what might bump them up, is that they lost consecutive World Series in 2010 and 2011.
I forgot about that.
And the 2011 World Series, the Cardinals were down to their last strike when in Game 6, when David Freese hit that double off the wall and scored 2 to tie it.
David Freese, ugh.
Right, and then they obviously lost Game 7 after that.
Yeah.
So, and this is a team that had to watch Vlad Guerrero play right field at AT&T Park when he was like 49. Like bumble up against the wall.
Oh man. Yeah,
okay.
that was tough.
So number 7, the Texas Rangers.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6, the Baltimore Orioles, also known as the Bordigs.
One of the all-time greatest like radio scams. That was just so enjoyable.
Super, super brief story. Just tell the listeners why we've called the Orioles the Bordigs.
So,
she called them the Oreos, not the Bordigs.
The Oreos. The Bordigs were the made-up team, but at any rate, in college I discovered that you can listen to the radio over the internet, which who knew what an influence that would have over my future life, where I'm now a podcaster. But I listened to the local radio show in Boston, Toucher and Rich, and they're just a great morning show. They're good with sports, but they're really just goofballs. And one thing they'll do is they do Ask a Pink Hat. So they'll go outside of Fenway Park after a game and just ask clearly drunk fans who really obviously are not there for the game questions. And they asked this girl to name all of the teams in the AL East. And she said the Red Sox, which was good.
Yeah.
The Crows, which I really liked. The Bordigs. Still don't know what the Bordigs are. And this team, which we're about to talk about, the Oreos.
Yeah.
Like, as in the cookie, the Oreos.
The Oreos.
Yep.
So the Oreos have not... So they came to Baltimore in 1954.
Yep.
They've won 3 World Series titles, but most recently in 1983, which is also when they played in their last World Series. So it's been some time.
So who won those series with them? Frank Robinson?
I guess. I think those are like the Palmer era kind of years.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Which, like, when you think of these teams, you think of like the retro Baltimore Oriole logo with the big eyes and the hat. Which they've actually started wearing again, which I really like. It's not like
which I'm very into.
Yeah, it's not like the authentic Oriole that they wore kind of through like the 90s and 2000s.
I'll always remember that. My sister Nicole's first softball team was the Orioles, and she had one of those with like the bird on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the Orioles are ranked higher than the Rangers here because the Rangers have played. It's worth noting. So it's been 36 years since the Orioles won a title, and it's been 47 since the Rangers. Well, the Rangers never have, but they've waited 47 years. So even though the Orioles have won a World Series, several, and they've done it more recently than the Rangers have existed, they're considered more tortured on this list because the Rangers are getting a more heavy favorable ranking from playing in World Series recently.
Yeah,
so,
which I think is reasonable. I think the fall for the Orioles from like storied franchise to what they've become has been tough.
It's also worth noting that they've sucked. Like they had a stretch kind of just after the Tigers from like 2013 to 2016 where they were really good and like World Series contenders. Mm-hmm. But before that, they were like the Orioles were synonymous with just shit for a very long time.
Awful.
Pretty much since the 80s. So, and then they've had some great players come through there, like Adam Jones, Manny Machado, Cal Ripken, obviously. But they
Sidney
generally
Ponson.
Mm-hmm. They generally struggle though to get big talent, and
they've also done a truly horrific job of developing their own talent.
Oh God.
Like a really magnificent ability to get a guy at number 10 overall in the draft, like big time pitcher, and then have them turn out to be nothing.
Remember like
Daniel Hudson?
See Daniel Hudson, see Chris Tillman, see Bundy, see
Bundy. That was the other one I was trying to think of.
See Jake Arrieta. They suck at doing that. So that's the Orioles for you. The Oreos. The one thing they do have going for them, they play in one of the most beautiful ballparks in the game.
Visually, one of the most enjoyable experiences. Their uniforms are gorgeous, and their park is beautiful.
So that's the Oreos. I just realized I blew right through the not top three.
It's because I didn't remind you of it.
I wish we. That's why we need the music to play like at us while we do this, so we don't.
Yeah,
forget.
If we only could have like some sort of automatic. If we didn't have to manually cue, I think it would be nice if there were an auto cue.
That would be the best thing.
Yeah.
Can you cue this segment?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think Kevin, you should cue this segment. Hey, thanks, Kev. That was great. So let's talk about the not top three. So this will be the three most spoiled fan bases. All right. Well, we know two of the top three.
I would think so.
Okay.
Well, who would you say?
The Yankees and the Red Sox.
Yeah, I think the Red Sox are officially now the most spoiled baseball franchise as of this moment because
it's if we're waiting towards recent history, they've got to be.
I think even if you're not, because I just don't think anyone. It's how could you possibly remember ever feeling shitty about the Red Sox when you've won 4 championships since 2004?
The only way is if you had a loved one who really loved the Red Sox who died right after the home run in 2003.
Yeah.
Like the Grady Little leaves him in a little too long situation. Like unless somebody you really loved who really wanted them to win died like that day, you can't feel crappy about it.
I agree. I think just the way that Red Sox fandom has kind of turned into, it's like it's just changed. And I know this from what you've told me. And so I think
very fundamentally changed.
That's the biggest thing. The Yankees obviously were always going to be on this list. Looking at the statistics really blew my mind. They've won 27 World Series.
Yeah.
They have played in 40. They've played in 4, and most of those came a long time ago, but that's crazy. And I don't even give a shit that their last World Series was 2009. Like, you're still spoiled. You haven't had a losing team since you won a World Series. Don't want to hear it.
No.
When you can shrug off a Jacoby Ellsbury contract like that, you're spoiled.
That is spoiled. Yeah, that should be a franchise ruiner.
Yep. And then the last one I picked was the St. Louis Cardinals because even when they're not good, they're still good. And, like, they're just a model fucking franchise. Like, every sport has one. It's the Spurs in basketball. It's the Patriots in football. Like, there's just one franchise that has it figured out. Yep. And in baseball, it's the Cardinals. They just are so...
The Cardinals are just like a perfect baseball organization. I know I keep harping on it, but great stadium, just beautiful classic uniforms, and a ridiculous procession of talent through that building over the past 20 years. Like, ridiculous number of guys who come through there who are just great.
They make great decisions. Like, they trade for Matt Holliday, they extend him.
Yep.
He's great for the entirety of the contract.
Yeah, the whole time.
They let Albert Pujols walk, he turns into a pile of sticks. Like, and like, they've had such great pitchers, like Carpenter and Wainwright, and like all those. I know you love Adam Wainwright.
Jim Edmonds. Remember how great Jim Edmonds was?
Jim Edmonds, like one
you
of the
and I
greatest.
looked him up a while back. You and I were having like a Jim Edmonds conversation, and his career war is wild.
Also, like he's one of my favorite players to just like watch YouTube highlights for a while.
Yeah.
People sleep on how good of a defender he was, but
crazy.
So yeah, they haven't won since 2011, but I don't care. They played against the Red Sox in 2013. They'll probably make the World Series again in the next year or two.
Yeah.
They'll probably extend Paul Goldschmidt, who will play really well into his late 50s. Like, that's just how it goes.
Yeah, I don't even know who's the GM there. Do you even know?
John Mozeliak.
Yeah, see, yeah, you're right. But that's so Cardinals. He's not
He
like
just lurks in the shadows.
Brand name. He's just a good GM.
Yep, really, really good GM. And they had like those La Russa teams were always fun, and they had Yachty for like they still have Yachty. Like,
yeah,
I couldn't even like I was obviously torn to shreds when the Tigers lost to them in 2006, but even then, it's like I don't hate Cardinals with like a deep fire like I do the Giants, and I think part of that is because they're just like, how can you be that mad to lose to a team like that? I don't know.
Yeah, they always deserve to be there when they're there.
Right. So,
yeah,
that's the not top three. I guess some other contenders, like the Cubs fandom, has become very spoiled in 1 year since 2016.
Yeah.
But I think the weight of their crushing history outweighs that to an extent still.
Agreed.
I think Giants fans
are very spoiled.
Insufferable.
See, the reason I think they're especially spoiled is because I don't think they deserve it when they win.
That 2012 team had no business by any metric beating the Tigers, which that was like one of the greatest Tigers teams ever, and I had like 6 maybe Hall of Famers on it or something stupid. That's probably Scherzer, Cabrera, Verlander for sure.
3 for sure. Yep.
So
Fire Hall of Famers.
6 is aggressive, but anyways, I digress. We can move on. Number 5.
Yep.
The Pittsburgh Pirates. So
yeah.
It's funny now, in recent history, we've grown accustomed to the Pirates being on the fringes of contention and usually contending for a wild card. But you have to remember, prior to 2000 and I don't even remember what year they started doing it, 2011, like they were just the laughingstock of baseball for a long, long time.
They were the laughingstock. Like, there was really no other franchise competing with them. It was the Pirates. Like, if you were a Little League player and you know how you just got assigned a team and you were assigned the Pirates, like, that was just torture. It was an embarrassment to be associated with them.
They had a
horrible uniforms, like
terrible
stigma of losing, like dumb name, just ugh.
They sucked, and it's not like they even... So, okay, they won their last World Series in 1979, and that's also the last World Series they played in. So it's been 40 years.
Yeah.
And since that time, since Barry Bonds left, can you think of any notable player that played there?
One, McCutchen.
Well, okay, between when they were shitty and when McCutchen came, because like that was when they were good again.
Garrett Jones.
Jason Bay.
Jason Bay is probably one of the best.
Neil Walker. Like,
God. Roided out second baseman and underpowered left fielder who just yanked a couple homers a year. Like, they were terrible.
How sad is that? That like we just scoured our brains. It's not like I'm a scholar of 80s and 90s Pittsburgh Pirates, but like...
No, but legitimately between Bonds and McCutchen, there's just like nobody.
It's a dead zone. And then
even both of those are tragic in their way. Like, Bonds is tragic because he left and then became very, obviously he had a second act, the more memorable second act. He was a great Pirate, but he's still remembered more as the later years Giants. And McCutchen is tragic because he just was so squandered.
Yep. It's sad. It's going to be like Trout. He's not the same player as Trout, but it's sad to see the Tigers or the Pirates end the McCutchen era without having done anything, really.
Yep.
It's a bummer.
Yeah.
I forgot Andy Van Slyke, definitely a notable Pittsburgh Pirate.
Yep.
Former Tigers first base coach.
Yep.
Okay. I think it's also worth noting that the Pirates have there have been like there have been like 7 National League wildcard games since that has happened, the play-in games, and the Pirates have lost like 3 of them.
Which is an extra torturous way to lose.
Yeah, they got beat up by Wainwright one year. I think they got shut out. They like lost 1-0 to the Giants that first time they went to the World, or the second time in 2012 when Bumgarner shut them out over like 9 innings or something.
Yep.
Like they have lost a disproportionate number of wild card play-in games. So they probably move up a little higher if I had to guess. That's a tortured fan base.
That's it. That is just a beat down. Just utterly beat down.
And it's going to be a while, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's nothing really all that great on the horizon.
No. So, that brings us to number 4. Number 4 are the San Diego Padres.
Oh. Worst name in professional sports.
Yeah, it's bad. The Padres came into the league in 1969. They then played in the World Series, or they played in 2 World Series. They've won neither.
I'm surprised they've played in 2.
I couldn't believe it. They lost in 98 to the Yankees, like those great late 90s teams.
Yep.
And they lost in 84 to the Detroit Tigers. So those were the 2
You've
times.
got that.
Yep. So that's a bummer. They've never won a World Series. And it's been since 1969. So they have waited exactly 50 years to see their team win a World Series, and it has not happened yet. That sucks.
Yeah. It's wild to me that there's been a baseball team in San Diego for 50 years.
I couldn't even believe that. I thought that they were like an expansion team in the 80s.
They have there's something so bland about their ballpark. Their uniforms are so boring. There's no lore. There's no like Padres lore. And this is the thing that I think when I don't think we're going to probably do too much re-ranking, but when we kind of talk about your system, the thing that is ultimately going to be missing from all of these assessments is lore and like the story around a franchise. Cause that's so important for thinking about how tortured your fan base is. There's nothing. I literally associate nothing with the Padres. Nothing.
Tony Gwynn is the only thing.
Tony
right?
Gwynn is the only thing. Nothing, like no stories or heroes or arcs.
No
nothing.
postseason moments. No like
nothing.
Anything.
Nothing except for just boring. They get those gray uniforms.
They suck. The only thing I associate with them are they have those weird like camo jerseys they wear on Sundays, which are kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's pretty much it. The only other thing that's notable is that they're featured in a really good episode of Drake and Josh because they happen to live in San Diego.
True.
Drake and Josh meet as young kids at a Padres game without knowing it, which is cool. That's it. That's their claim to fame.
Yeah.
And they played in a really fun, actually it was really boring, but I remember they played a game 163 because they tied the Rockies for the division lead. It might have been 2007, the year that the Rockies ended up playing in the World Series.
Yep.
Anyways, that's it.
Yeah. That's
50 years of crap.
I just as a Padres fan, I would just want them to leave town. Like I think I would just be so amazed that I still had a baseball team.
Well, what's weird is that it's not like they're sharing their fan base with other teams in the same city. They're the only team in San Diego.
Yeah. Are they? Wait, they're literally the only professional team in San Diego now, right? Like of all sports. Wow. Yeah. Yeah, it should be Padres country.
And it's not. Although I will say things are looking up because they did get Machado and they have like unanimously the best farm system in baseball. So
yeah,
they'll probably still find a way to fuck it up.
They will.
All right. I'm going to skip honorable mentions. And then we can talk about those later. Well, we will mention them later because the 11 through there's some ones that we'll want to talk about. But all right. Number 3. The Seattle Mariners. So
yeah.
Okay, so there are 2 teams in baseball that have never played in a World Series. One of them is the Washington Nationals, who came to Washington in 2005. So it's been 14 years.
Yep.
Okay. The other team is the Seattle Mariners, who have played in Seattle since 1977.
Yeah.
42 years, and they have never even played in the World Series. That is tough.
That's especially tough because the Mariners are a team that has not in recent years, but at least in the 90s, at one time hosted several of the best players of the last 40 years. They had one team in particular that had 3 Hall of Famers, 3 extreme Hall of Famers, not just kind of Hall of Famers, real Hall of Famers.
Inner circle guys.
Assuming no steroid use. They had A-Rod, Ken Griffey Jr., and Randy Johnson on one team. Those are 3 of the best people to ever step on a baseball diamond. And so they have, this is a team with history, with prestige, that has had real talent, and just crap. Real crap.
It's particularly devastating because that 2001 team was because if they had won in 2001, I think this is a different feeling story.
Yeah.
The 2001 team was one of the best baseball teams ever assembled. They won 116 games or something stupid like that.
Yeah. Yep.
And then got bounced in the division series.
Yeah.
They may have made it to the championship series, but they did not make it to the World Series.
They did not make it to the World Series, though. That's for damn sure.
Devastating.
Yeah.
Devastating. And they've had some good players come through there. A lot of good Japanese talent. Ichiro, one of the most exciting players to ever play. Mm-hmm. So there's that. They've had other guys come through there. King Felix.
Martinez. King Felix, yeah. Yep.
Hisashi Iwakuma, my favorite. So it's not like there haven't been fun Mariners teams, but they've never even sniffed success other than that 2001 team, and it's really, really a bummer.
It's especially a bummer because of what you said about the Japanese players. There's such a cool connection between the Japanese fan base and the Japanese players in Seattle. They just sort of feel like their own little world because it's just a unique thing where you have this ethnic matchup between the players and the fan base. It's a really cool, it's a little outpost. It's not a spot where there's a lot of baseball, and they're a rabid fan base, and things just haven't worked out for them. It sucks.
They'll get there. I can't wait until they get there. And it helps that I have one Mariners fan in my life, and she is the best, and I adore her Mariners fandom. Yeah. That shouts to you, Steph. We're sorry that you've sat through this for so long.
Hey, you know who sucks though, Steph? Seahawks.
Yeah, I don't think there's any debate about that.
No.
Number 2. I was surprised at this. I did not expect to see this team at number 2. Number 2 is the Milwaukee Brewers.
Oh, interesting.
Right?
Talk to me.
I don't think of them as a tortured fan franchise, but they've been around since 1970.
Yep.
They've never won a World Series.
Really?
And they've never won.
Wow.
And I should make it clear. We're talking about a geographically located sports fan base. So I'm not counting the Milwaukee Braves that came from.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's fine.
So 1970, a lot of that time was spent in the American League. The last time they played in the World Series was 1982.
Yeesh.
So it's been 37 years since they've even played in the World Series, which is stunning. The only good, really good Brewers teams in that interval, I feel have been this past year when they were a bad break away from making the World Series. So,
yep.
And then that magical CC Sabathia year in 2008.
So is that the year he gets traded to them and just pitches every other day? Throws 200 innings in a half season and is just unhittable? He
gets traded from the Indians. He basically single-handedly brings the Brewers to the playoffs, and I think they even get to the championship series.
Yeah.
And then they lost.
If I recall, they got pretty far.
That was 2008, so that would have been the Phillies. I don't think they ended up losing to the Phillies. I think they lost to the Giants or the Cardinals.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was really, really fun to watch. And that same year, Sabathia should have gotten a no-hitter, but a ball got bounced right in front of him on the mound, and he leaned down to pick it up, and he took his eye off it, and he just grabbed the tip of the ball with his fingertips, and it was an error, and they called it a hit, and that was the only base runner he'd allowed. So he still got the no-hitter, I believe, but it should have been a perfect game. Or no, it was ruled a hit, and it should have been an error.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of torture in itself. That was back when they've had some good players. Like, they got all the good years from Prince Fielder.
Yep. That turd Ferguson, Ryan Braun.
Ugh. Worst. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't really think of Milwaukee as a baseball town. And so, like, it's hard to... I just, like, don't hear their fans, like, wailing and moaning like you do with some of these other teams.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just because they're a more graceful fan base. I don't know. It's also a smaller fan base, but...
I think ultimately they don't quite have the... They've got the credentials, but they don't quite have the feel.
Yeah, they don't feel like lovable losers or anything like that.
Yeah.
They've got a great ballpark, as we know from my bachelor party.
Damn straight they've got a great ballpark.
And I love that they tailgate. I'd love that. What a delightful experience that was.
Especially because we had some great brats, spotted cow. Good times.
Number one.
This
is mostly on the weight of the longest championship drought in baseball. It's one of the longest ones in sports, I think. It has been 71 years since the Cleveland Indians won a World Series.
71.
That's 1948, folks.
Egad. We're not even in Korea at that point, right?
That's like 3 years after World War II ended.
Yeah. Yeesh.
That's wild.
That's tough.
There are probably a lot of Indians fans that went their entire lives without seeing them win a World Series.
Yeah. The Indians, to me, capture all of the objective and subjective criteria we'd want to talk about here, because they hit the objective issue of going so long without a World Series, but subjectively, they're a great franchise with great history and a great procession of talent, lots of chances, lots of bad breaks. Like, they've just got it all. They really have got it all.
Yep. Horrible branding. I will say that they've got a really annoying stadium. It's fine. It's a fine stadium, but the drumming guy is really annoying. And a couple years ago, we went to see a Tigers game there. Me, Jeff, my mom, my sister, my brother. And it was in the middle of a pennant race. Like, the Tigers and Indians were atop the central standings. This was when the Tigers had Torrey Hunter, so it was like 2014.
Mm-hmm.
That place was 70% Tigers fans. It was embarrassing for Indians fans.
That is embarrassing. You wonder whether it's because they're bad fans or because they're just so shell-shocked.
It could be both. It could be both. I will say that they have had some awesome players go through there. They got Jim Thome, Manny, Alomar, and recently they've had some of the most exciting... Like, Francisco Lindor is one of the top 5 exciting players in baseball. Like, there have been some fun teams to watch, and some great pitchers have come through there too, including CC Sabathia, Cliff
Skinny
Lee.
Bartolo Colon.
That's
I mean,
true.
you and I have talked about it a billion times, but the 2000-2001 Cleveland Indians is one of the best teams I've ever seen assembled. On a baseball dime. Just a freakishly good team. Wild that they managed to not win a World Series.
Agreed. So, I think even though they've had some good teams and some awesome players come through there, I feel pretty good about them at number 1.
Yeah. I especially feel good about them given the recent just like bummers that have gone down in Cleveland town. Especially because I have such an affinity for my man Terry Francona. He's just one of the most likable people in sports, and the fact that he is stuck on this sort of bummer of a run here is just, it makes it even worse for me because I like him so much.
Who doesn't? Well, yeah, but all right. Okay, so I'm going to list a couple of teams that I think should contend here. Surprisingly low on the list, they came in at 13, are the New York Mets. Because they won a World Series, the Miracle Mets in 86. Yep. And then they played it in 2015. Mm-hmm. However, they're and they played in 2000, so like they've had good teams and some great players come through there, but just the general cursed nature of that franchise I think they deserve a spot because it's
The
been a lot of
vibe
shit.
is tough. The vibe is tough, and the natural comparisons to the Yankees are even tougher.
Yeah. So I think they warrant discussion. The Tigers were at 12, but like I said, I don't consider our fan base to be tortured just yet.
That's weird. I feel like they're really tortured in recent years, though.
It's been to get that close has been soul crushing. You saw me in 2012. I was despondent for at least a couple of days.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel so grateful for all of the good, like awesome Tigers. The most of my life of being an active, engaged baseball fan, the Tigers have been contending and making the playoffs. So that's, I don't know. It's hard for me to consider ours. People a lot older than me, sure. Yeah. So maybe I'm weighting my own experience a little too heavily. The other ones close here were, it bears mentioning. So there are 3 other teams. We talked about the Nationals. There are 2 other teams that have not won World Series. The Rockies and the Rays. But the Rays have only been around since 1998 and the Rockies since 1993, so they just haven't had to wait as long.
Those are tortured franchises. And
they've both played in World Series.
They've also both been better than they should have been at times. Like in a way that I think those fan bases should be pretty okay with the way things have gone.
Yeah. The only I'd say Tampa's closest because they play in a shit stadium.
Their stadium is just horrendous, but it's hard for me to really feel like their fan base is all that tortured because they don't really care.
It does seem that way.
It's a terrible fan base.
So, that's that. What do you think? Would you put... do you have any others that I'm missing here that you've been thinking about or anything?
No, I think your list did a great job. I think, like I said throughout, the only thing that this doesn't capture is, like, how hard it is to be close and not quite make it. How much the expectations of your franchise matter. Because, like, I think the Rays have just been an abject failure for a lot of their time. They had that great stretch with Joe Madden. But at the same time, their fan base doesn't care. There's no expectation that they'd be good. Like, to me, there's no torture there because it's just been kind of bad uniformly, other than the Madden stuff. Whereas I think being an Orioles fan, even though they've been similarly bad, there's still the memory of the greatness that I think makes it so much worse. So I think it's hard to capture that in the formula. And that's the only thing I would probably weight a little differently.
I agree. So I think for that reason, I think the Padres moved down a few pegs.
Yes, that's a good example. I'd say the Pirates probably moved down a little bit. I might pull like the A's up a little bit.
Oh, interesting. See, I would have moved the Pirates maybe up a little bit just because like there was that expectation of greatness and they were like their nadir, their bottoming out period was worse than probably any other team here. Like
that's true.
I think up until I remember that the stat was always like the Pirates hadn't made the playoffs since before I was born, up until I was like 23, which is insane.
That's tough.
So, and I think, yeah, you're right. Like the Rangers having gotten to 2 World Series consecutively and lost both times, maybe they go up a little bit too. I think the Mets belong on here. Maybe low, but I think the Mets
probably go on here. I agree. I'd probably pull the Twins off.
I think so too, and they barely scrape down there anyways, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's add the Mets.
Yeah.
And then let's get to work. Let's start at the top.
Yeah, I'm good with Indians at 1.
I agree.
I don't love Brewers at 2 necessarily. I feel like the Mariners are a little more tortured than them.
I think the Mariners are a square number 2. That's devastating. To have never even had the excitement of watching your team in the World Series for a let's see here, a 42-year-old man. That's tough.
That is tough.
I would honestly even move the Pirates over Milwaukee and San Diego.
Yeah, I was going to say Orioles then Pirates, but I'd be okay with Pirates then Orioles.
Pirates, Orioles, Then I think we can...
Brewers, probably.
Yeah.
Then Padres.
That's such disrespect, but I love it.
Yeah.
They haven't played in a world. They've never won, and they haven't played in one in 40 odd years, and we're like, number 6.
Yeah, they don't care.
And then after that we have Rangers, A's, Reds, and Mets.
Yeah.
I don't think of the Reds as a tortured fan base so much. I think I'd be happy to put them at 10.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel good about the Mets at 9. Like, as shitty as their experience has been, they've had like pockets of really, really good teams, and they've consistently had fun players, even if they've ended up sucking or playing better for different teams.
Totally agreed.
They are still paying Bobby Bonilla, so
yep,
I'm still comfortable with 9. And then we just have to figure out if we want the Rangers and the Athletics at 7, 8, or flipped.
I think that those are appropriate. I like the where they are.
Okay. Then what we have done is defined the 10 most tortured fan bases in baseball right now.
Damn right we have.
Yeah.
This was great. Your system was really terrific. I liked the tweaks, but I think that the system gave us an awesome base.
I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out, and I will say I've used the same system already to compile a list for a different sport, and I think we're going to have a good discussion there too. I'm looking forward to more of these.
Beautiful.
All right,
Doug, want to run us through?
I will. Number 10, the Cincinnati Reds. Number 9, the New York Metropolitans, the Mets. Number 8, the Oakland Athletics. Number 7, the Texas Rangers. Number 6, the San Diego Padres. Number 5, the Milwaukee Brewers. Number 4, the Baltimore Orioles, the Oreos. Number 3, the Pittsburgh Pirates. Number 2, the Seattle Mariners. And number 1, the poor tortured Cleveland Indians.
Damn right. That was great. That's a hell of a list, my friend.
Yeah, good work, amigo.
I'm looking forward to some baseball.
It's about damn time.
It's about damn time. Kyle, do you think we should talk to the people about where they can check us out?
Yeah, do that.
So people, if you want to check us out on any of the social media networks out there, you should check us out at Top10KM on Instagram. Check us out at Top10KM on our kind of shitty Twitter. Check us out at our Top 10 with Kyle and Mike Facebook group. Those are some good spots. You can email us with any suggestions. If you want to host, you want us to do some research for you, top10km@gmail.com. All these, the 10 is spelled out TEN. Mm-hmm. And if you want to listen to the podcast somewhere other than the way you listen already, check us out at the Apple Podcast app, Stitcher, Podbean, Spotify, pretty much anywhere that podcasts can be found. That's what I would say, my friend.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to say. I would say that if you enjoyed our theme music or our not top 3 ditty, you have Kevin MacLeod to thank for that. He composed those.
I thank him every day.
Thanks, Kev.
Thanks, Kev.
And if you enjoyed seeing our lovely visages on our artwork, don't forget that Erin Sant put that together, and you can see more of her stuff at Sant Design on Instagram. It's a great place to see stuff like that.
Damn straight.
That concludes this week's episode of Top 10 with Kyle and Mike. I'll see you next week, buddy.
Adios.